Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. It's Tuesday night. We got the boys back on the show once again. Let me introduce them here. We've got Chad Hutchinson back after a couple of week break. He was on vacation. Oh, you're in Alaska, right?
Yep.
Awesome. I heard it's a great place. I want to get there one of these days.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah, awesome. We got Chuck Alvarez.
Greetings.
All the way from Scotland. It's getting late for him, but he's here as always. Mr. Stephen Reed and the Professor of Prague in the upper left-hand corner, at least on my screen, Ken Golden.
Hello.
What's up, Dylan?
Hey.
Time to revisit the album after the split. Who did it better? What's interesting is I was looking it up right before we started, and these two albums were released like a week apart, something like that. I think March 31st, 1978, Genesis, and then there were three, and the first or second week in April of 1978, Steve Hackett, Please Don't Touch. Pretty fine albums, I would say. Obviously, Steve Hackett released Voyage of the Acolyte while he was still in Genesis, and then I think he realized, yeah, this is kind of what I want to do. They're not using my song, so I'm going to go out and continue to do that, and that's what he did. And when he did that, they decided, well, you know what? The three of us can carry on, and we will. And they did. But who did it better? These first two albums, immediately after they decided to go their separate ways. We'll have Chad kick us off here. Let's start with the big band first. We'll start with Genesis, and then there were three. What do you think?
Right. Well, I think really one of the theme for me for both of these albums is they miss each other flat out. There are elements in each one that they could have used the other guys to kind of fill in the music, in my opinion. We've talked about, and then there were three before, and we talked about Genesis. There are a couple weak songs on here. I think things like "Say It's All Right, Joe," I think is really not a very good song. You get to the end, I guess about the last minute, the band kicks in and it gets a little bit better. But there's some solid stuff on here. Down and Out's a great opener. I like Undertow, Burning Rope, Deep in the Motherlode, Lady Lies. They're all really great, very strong songs. They have Ken's favorite song, Follow You, Follow Me, on it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. Hold back, Ken. I know you'll get hurt.
Without that, there's no album. Yeah.
That's true. I mean, why did it sell so much? That's why. I know you don't want to admit that.
I know.
But Ballad of Big and Snowbound are nice songs. I think they're a little off kilter from the typical Genesis sound in some ways. There are a couple of songs that weren't on the album that were solid. Well, I should say one. I think The Day the Light Went Out was good. Vancouver is okay. Both of them are a little Dukish, so they almost didn't kind of fit the sonic palette that and then there were three has. But I think And Then There Were Three is a good album. It's not a great album. It really misses the romanticism that Steve Hackett brings to the table, the big 12-string guitars and his long sustained solos and things like that. And I think it just misses a little bit of that weirdness that he brings in too. So again, it's a good album. It's not a great album. I can listen to it all the way through. It holds together for the most part, but from a Genesis standard, it's okay. Let's put it that way.
And what do you think of Please Don't Touch?
Well, this is for Ken. Look at that.
Yeah,
Don't look too closely. This is about the shittiest version of it you can find. I think somebody ran over this with their truck about 6 times.
What pressing you have? Chrysalis?
Yes.
Steven, you have Charisma?
Yeah.
I have Charisma.
I have Charisma as well in the closet.
I found this in a bargain bin at a flea market. I don't know how many years ago.
Yeah.
But of the 4 Steve Hackett albums that started off his career, Voyage, excuse me, Please Don't Touch, Spectral Mornings, and Defector, I think this is the weakest of the 4, I will say. He admitted that he tried to make this album by sort of jumping from one style to the next. It was very intentional to what kind of U-turn could he make to go to the next thing. And he's got some strange ballads on here. He's got some things that he's known for, like Please Don't Touch and Racing in A. You know, they're more typical Steve Hackett, what we got to know from him. But there are, and things like Kim. I think Kim is a beautiful acoustic piece, which is inspired by Satie, I believe. But there's some weird ones, like How Can I and Hoping Love Will Last. Like Hoping Love Will Last. Randy Crawford's got an amazing voice. This song doesn't belong to this album. It just doesn't fit. It really kind of messes with the flow. And I think How Can I with Richie Havens, again, another great voice. That's okay. Then it goes down to Hoping Love Will Last, which just doesn't belong. And then Land of a Thousand Autumns is kind of floats there. But that leads into Please Don't Touch, which is a scorcher, and that should have been on Wind and Wuthering, as we know. And it hints towards Unquiet Earth in there at times. It was written as sort of as a companion piece, I think I read. But Steve he seemed to put this album together with all these different people. You know, he's including Phil Ahart and Steve Walsh of Kansas, and the two singers I mentioned, plus his brother on flute, and even what was his name?
Chester Thompson.
Graham. Yeah, Chester's on this, and then Graham Smith.
Graham Smith from String Driven Thing.
Yeah. But yeah, he seemed to, what I read is he tried to put this album together with all these different people and sort of be somewhat invisible, sort of like write the tracks, direct the tracks, put his pieces in here and there. Like I said, he's got a couple that he's known for, like Racing in A, even Narnia, Please Don't Touch, but he's a little bit in the background in some of these. And this is not the strongest of his first four. I think he's not actively involved enough. I feel like he stepped way too far back after doing Voyage of the Acolyte, which was so good. And then Spectral Mornings, I love a lot, and the same with Defector. So I think this is a weird way for him to first go solo without Genesis. I know, like you said, he did Voyage while he was still there. It's sort of an odd bird. So if I'm going to pick between these two, I think the flow and the feel is actually better with, and then there were three. I just think this is that Please Don't Touch is a little clunky. Got a couple hot spots, but it's a clunky listen to go all the way through. So my pick is going to be, and then there were three.
Cool. Chuck.
All right. Sorry, with then number three. What's that? You know, being that I discovered I've known the Genesis since the early 80s with Duke, you know, all the songs that you got to hear on radio. I was always a fan of more like a Pink Floyd, Jethro Tull, Yes, before I became a fan of Genesis. The very first album that I ever purchased by Genesis was And Then There Were Three. And when I first bought it, I didn't like it. You know, I didn't care much for it. You know, outside of Follow You, Follow Me, and perhaps maybe Deep in the Mother Lode, I really didn't like the album. You know, it took me some time to get used to listening to the album. And then for some reason I ran upon the bootleg, what's the name of the bootleg from October 13th, 1978, From the Mouth of the Monster.
Oh, from Chicago, the Chicago Radio Room.
Mm-hmm. So hearing that album back in 1989 or so, maybe 1989, 1990-ish or so, I bought that album, and it shed a wholly different light on that album. You know, because they played all of the songs that were the best songs off of the album. You know, you had like crunchy guitar sounds and so it sounded so much better. And I went back and revisited the album, and then I started to fall in love with each and every track on there. You know, so I got to listen to everything beforehand, and I started to discover everything afterwards. After listening to the Chicago date, and then I got to hear how great this band would sound with like an authentic guitarist on there. Daryl Stuermer, you know, when you think about him, and so you know, it's a shame that they never brought him into the studio to play most of these songs. You know? But getting back to as time went on, and so I started to like each and every song. You know, I always loved Forgive Me, Ken, but I always loved Follow follow me, but it's a strange song, what's in comparison to everything else on there. They still had that aggressive type ballad, and so, but the thing is that it just, Mike Rutherford's guitar playing, so which he did have some moments on there, but it was just too much of a synth heavy album, but I still love the album. So it's always like, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the album. Is it a great album? No, but it is a very good album. Which I finally got used to songs like Snowbound, and Say It's All Right, Joe. These were two songs that I struggled with for quite some time. But in all in the whole, so when I listen to the album, I can still listen to it in one complete listen without skipping the song. So that's my take on that album. Then you have Please Don't Touch. Listening to Please Don't Touch, it kind of bothers me that it's all over the place. I love Richie Havens. I love the two tracks, Icarus Ascending and How Can I? But I have a hard time thinking that these songs would have fit well outside of the title track onto Wind and Wuthering. I couldn't see them being any of these songs really being on there. But getting back to Please Don't Touch, I think just like what Chad said, I think it's the weakest of the four without being a bad album, because it's still pretty much excellent. But I'm just kind of saddened that Steve took a back burner to everything else that was going on in there, because he did have some strong tracks, but outside of Kim, and the title track, you would wish that he played more guitar in it, like his prior album on Voyage, and then on Spectral Mornings, which in my opinion is his best ever album. But when it comes to Please Don't Touch, I just really wish that he had more of a guitar presence on it instead of a songwriting presence. And I found it hard to believe that most of the songs were written for Wind and Wuthering. But other than that, like I said, it's still an excellent album. But to me, my favorite songs on the album are the songs that Richie Havens sung on. And I do like the song that Randy Crawford sung on. But it's, once again, it's just Steve being all over the place. So up to two, I would say that I would go with And Then Number 3, which still has a soft spot in my heart for it, and I still love the album. And whenever I can, so I try to listen to it, and I would listen to it all throughout. And Then Number 3 is my pick.
All right, 2 for Genesis.
There was another track that Hackett recorded at the time called Seven of Cups, which is a real nice acoustic piece. That would have served Please Don't Touch quite well, in my opinion, but I don't know, wouldn't have put it over the top. It's a really nice track. It's a shame it's not on there.
Stephen.
It's a real close run thing with these two. It's difficult to find an awful lot that hasn't been said already, because I really pretty much agree with everything that's been said so far. I think that And Then There Were 3 is more progressive than it probably gets credit for now. I think that when you compare it to what they'd done before, what Genesis had been known for, yeah, it's a seismic shift, really. But the link is there. It's the same band. It's the same band. Obviously, Follow You, Follow Me, it makes the album and it breaks the album, because realistically, it makes it huge. It makes them huge. It takes a band that had a really big following, and you can sense them going, oh, whoa, what's that over there? Well, that's the charts. And from there on in, the journey completely changes. Yeah, Duke is in the same sort of vein, but we're already on a different journey entirely. And I think that this album is often kind of lumped in with that. But when you listen to it, and you go back to things like Undertow, Many Too Many, I think that there's still a close enough bond with what the band had done prior to know that this is Genesis. Yes, it's Genesis without Gabriel. It's Genesis without Hackett, and Rutherford, as we've discussed before, does an okay job. You don't want an okay job from the guitarist on a Genesis album, realistically. And that is, to me, the proper make or break here. I absolutely agree that And Then Number 3 is a good album. It's not a great album. But Time is a Healer. And yeah, I mean, I was 5 when this came out. but I've had it for years and years and years. I go back to it now and I like it more than I did when I first heard it, because when I first heard it, I wanted it to sound like the Genesis that I was getting into, which was the early Gabriel era, even though the Genesis I first experienced was the chart act, realistically. So it's flawed. And if it's an out and out prog album that you're looking for, yeah, it's probably not that. That's not what this album is. And it was never really its intention. It's interesting looking at the back of this, because I often look at the back of this album and say, and then there was one. That's almost like what the back is telling you. He's very alone here. Really doesn't tell the story of the album at all. Because this doesn't feel like a solo album. Feels like not even a band album. I'm not sure what it feels like. It feels to me, without really knowing if it's true or not, that this is what happens when you go into an album with a set idea of what you want to do. Sometimes that results in a really focused sound. It's definitely this. But when your idea is to try different things in different styles and to dip your toe into different places and to maybe experience culturally something different in a musical sense, Genesis, prior to kind of this kind of era, had always had a real Englishness to their sound. There was that kind of pastoral brittleness, a bright sound, even when it was high-paced and technical and dense. There was always that fragility about what they were doing. And when you try and mash that together with something that's much more American, there's blues on this album. And you've got guys on here that I think are fantastic. Steve Walsh, Phil Ehart. There is that kind of, there's a mix and a marriage of the Hackettness. It's not really Genesis-y, it sounds like Simon. But then you bring that kind of Kansasness to it. And it seems to meet in the middle on the two tracks that Walsh sings on. And I really quite like them. They work for me, but I'm a massive Kansas fan. Do they sound like Kansas? No. But you put Walsh's voice on the top and you're going to go there, aren't you, realistically? And then the Richie Havens songs, to me, he's almost kind of in the phrasing, not necessarily in the whole feel of it. He's a bit like Gabriel. There's that kind of fatherly tone. He's a bit gruff in places and it's about bringing atmosphere. But one sounds over here and one sounds over there. Then you bring in Randy Crawford and that song is great. It's a really good song in there. But where does it fall in this kind of conglomeration of ideas? I don't think it really does. But to me, the album both works and fails on its instrumentals, realistically, because there's stuff on here. The title track's fantastic. It really, to me, stands above most of what else is on the album. But then there's just other things that don't really work here at all, I think, in those sense. And then, I mean, when Hackett sings, why do we do that? Why do bands, acts, whatever it is, I mean, Carry On Up the Vicarage? There's a British Carry On film series that is slapstick nonsense. Is it a nod to that? I kind of think it is. I know it's a tribute to Agatha Christie. Is it really? I don't really know. The vocals are nonsense. The vocals are absolute nonsense. And it ruins what underneath there is pretty tight music, nice construction, nice composition. There's nothing wrong with it until you get someone going over the top.
Can you do that again, please?
No, I'd rather not. The first the first time you hear it, you think, yeah, that's shit. And then the second time you hear it, you go, oh, wow, that's really shit. And the more I've heard it, the less I like it. And it's rolled up there as track 2, and already we're ruining what's going on. And that really sums up what happens on this album for me, is that there are lots of highs. There are a couple of moments on here. I would say that Narnia and the title track, maybe my favourite songs about anything we're talking about tonight. However, as an album, I'm going to go and listen to this. And I'm not a guy that picks up the needle and skips on. I put an album on, I listen to side A, turn it over and I listen to side B. So that's still what I would do if I was to put this on. I'm not really drawn to do that because I know that 40% of it I kind of go, yeah, about. So yeah, I'm sorry, we're just over halfway in here and it's already 3 votes for an end of the week.
Yep. So Ken, regardless of where we go, Steve
I
ain't winning
lose.
this one.
No, I
Yeah,
win.
I didn't like doing that, sorry. I couldn't not.
All right, Ken, what do you think?
So I'm not going to talk about And Then There With You too much. I mean, well, also, Pete, I should ask, how many lists should I have tonight?
Oh man, please make it 3.
No list tonight.
What other albums
There's
did you
only
pick?
2 albums, so I don't know how much
All
more
right,
you can
all
go.
No,
No,
Ken's
no
got
list
3.
tonight. So, this is, I think, the third time since I've been doing the shows. This is the third time I've talked about it, and then there were 3.
Yeah, I know, right?
So I'm not going to go on about it too long. I kind of come around on the album. I think I mentioned that last time. The first time I talked about it, I really didn't like the album. And then I went back, and when I listen to the album, I hear a lot of ballads. I hear a lot of good songs. I hear Tony Banks playing classic Tony Banks sounds, but I also hear the holes where Steve Hackett should be, because Rutherford just can't handle the guitar parts in the same way. He's just not the guitarist that Hackett is. Banks could cover all the 12-string stuff, but Rutherford was playing a lot of guitar synthesizer at the time. He was playing, he was playing a Strat or something. I don't remember what the hell it was, but he's just not the virtuoso that Hackett is. And when I listen to the music on And Then There Were 3, in my mind, I can hear what I think Hackett would be doing and making the album as a whole much more interesting. Not as interesting for me as Trick of the Tail or Wind and Wuthering. I think the material on those albums is stronger because, again, I mean, there's really good songs on here, but it's very ballad driven. Follow You, Follow Me is a piece of shit, but everything, the rest of the album, not bad, and for me, I think I gave this like a solid B by Genesis standards. I gave this a solid B, and I stick by it. It's a good album. It's not the Genesis album I'm going to pull out, but it's there. It's in the collection. The Hackett album is something entirely different, and everything that everybody said up till now, I don't disagree with, but I think the thing they're missing is the entire premise of the album, I think, was either from Steve or his management, probably both, that he wanted to show his abilities outside of Genesis as a songwriter, as a guitarist, and I think he was targeting the American market. It doesn't sound like a British album, like a European album. It sounds like an American album. It's all apart. He's got Graham Smith from String Driven Thing and Van de Graaff playing violin on some of it. He's got his brother John playing flute. Everybody else is American. I mean, you don't get more American Richie Havens. I mean, the guy played Woodstock. I mean, he was like, singing Freedom, so you got 2 guys from the Zappa band, right? You got Chester Thompson, you got Tom Fowler playing bass. You get 2 guys from Kansas, Phil Earhart and Steve Walsh. It doesn't get more American than that. Randy Crawford, I don't know from, but clearly American, beautiful voice. So it was very clear he was going for a sound. I think the two
his
songs,
record company turns around and wouldn't let him release Narnia with Steve Walsh because it sounded like Kansas. They released a different version with John Perry on vocals.
well, I think that the songs, I think the Steve Walsh was for Steve's solo career. I think Steve Walsh was the best vocalist he ever worked with. I mean, John Hicks was fine, and Nad's okay, and Steve's not much of a vocalist, as we know. And in fact, he always seemed to screw around with it, like Carrying On Up the Vicarage. He was always like doing like weird. There's always seemed to be something weird that he'd play around with on every one of his albums. So he has Richie Havens on there, and he's singing on 2 tracks. and I'm not the world's biggest Richie Havens fan, but he brings some gravitas, I think. He's a very soulful voice. And I thought that Icarus Ascending, I thought was a great closer. But like I said, you don't get more American than Richie Havens. The album's designed to show all of his facets as a musician. I mean, Voyage of the Acolyte sounds like a long lost Genesis album. The production on Please Don't Touch, it's like the anti, Genesis album. It's as I said, this sounds like something that could have come out on Columbia alongside a Kansas album, or an REO Speedwagon album. Steven's raising his hand.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand because I don't want to be rude and just interrupt. I wouldn't do that. Because what strikes me, though, I agree with every word you've said. However, one of the major things that doesn't sound American to me is Hackett.
No, well, he's
Hackett's
not.
work on the album doesn't sound American. He still sounds very English, quite pastoral, quite fragile in the sound.
Yeah.
And to me, it really compromises the overall idea of what it's meant to be. If it's meant to be an American sounding album, well, it isn't really, because he can't quite get over that line. You can bring as much of that influence and sound, but if the guy that's composing it all doesn't have that in here somewhere.
Well, Stephen, the thing is, he's British, right?
Well, absolutely.
And just because you want it to be doesn't mean that it's going to be. I
Absolutely.
mean, Steve made an album called Blues with a Feeling. It's one of the worst blues albums I've ever heard in my life. Steve's my favorite guitar player. I love Steve Hackett. Steve, if you're watching this, I love you, man. You're awesome. But I don't like Blues with a Feeling because for me, it's just not. He sounds like a fish out of water. I'm not saying that this album is a marriage. What I'm saying is this was the attempt to try and bring Steve Hackett, the guitar player from Genesis, to a broader audience. So you've got songs on here which I think really showcase his abilities. I mean, Land of a Thousand Autumns segues into Please Don't Touch, and that's, I mean, as a piece of music, that's beyond anything on And Then There Were Three. And it's amazing that song was not on Wind and Wuthering, and if that was the catalyst for him to leave, well, then fine. I could understand why, because that's a great piece of music. And didn't GTR recycle that as Hackett to Bits?
Mm-hmm.
They kind of, So the downside to the album is, as I said, it's not a cohesive album. As his next albums, Spectral Mornings, Defector, where he was working with a band. He had a touring band, and they were recording with him. This is a collection of guests that they're to complement him. So the other thing is that listening to this on record is a little different experience than listening to it on CD. When you listen to it on CD, you have How Can I, Richie Havens singing How Can I, and that's followed by Randy Crawford doing Hoping Love Will Last right in the middle of the album. So the album so in terms of the pacing of the album, it really drags right in the middle of the album. So where you almost kind of want it to be doing this, it kind of. So I would have sequenced the album a little differently. It's not quite as apparent when you're listening. The end of side one is Hoping Love Will is How Can I, and then side two starts with Hoping Love Will Last. I thought the Randy Crawford song is kind of like a fish out of water. It's there to sort of demonstrate Steve's songwriting ability, or something. I could almost kind of hear. I mean, it's as good a ballad as anything on Then There Were Three. I mean, I could almost hear Phil singing it somewhere.
But that song originally, that's one of the, I think one of 4 songs on Please Don't Touch that was actually meant for Wind and Wuthering, but he he had mentioned that he wanted someone else to sing it, and he wanted a female singer, and the the three guys were like, no, that's not our thing, man. You know, we don't want that.
And thinking about that, how cool would it have been if they would have brought in a great singer, female singer, and maybe do a duet with Phil on that piece?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a beautiful piece of music,
Mm-hmm.
and it would have been a Genesis. It would have been a Genesis song. You know what I mean? So, so overall, for me, it's not his best album. I mean, he had better albums to come, but listening to these two albums again, and I honestly, I hadn't listened to Please Don't Touch in years, and I've heard, and then there were three, more than enough lately. For me, Please Don't Touch, it's the better album. Clearly, of the two, it's the album I'd rather hear, simply because the high points are much higher than anything on Then There Were Three. Then There Were Three is, to me, it's like, as I said, I call it a B. It's an even keel. Tell me one track. Tell me what's the key track on Then There Were Three. Can anybody tell me the one standout track on Then There Were Three that's so far above anything else?
Sure. No, I agree with you.
No, but I think that what Chad said earlier rings true. I think And Then There Were Three flows.
Yeah, sure.
Whereas I think Please Don't Touch really doesn't flow. There's no flow.
It doesn't flow.
I only listen to it on vinyl because that's the version that I've got.
Yeah.
Even a side A and a side B, it's an up and down journey. You continually go, oh, this bit's great, this bit's not.
It's because Stephen,
but it's preceded by this one, and I can't get into that bit, and I wish he'd hurry up here so we can get to there.
Stephen, it's because as again, I think the whole premise of the album was to showcase the different sides of Steve Hackett.
And that's what I was saying at the start, is that when you go into an album with a very set idea of what you want it to be, sometimes you achieve that, but it doesn't actually make it's not a bad end result, but it doesn't make an end result where you think, well, actually the whole thing hangs together.
I think the material overall, I think the material is strong. As I said, the pacing is a little off, and it's perhaps a bit too diverse.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, boy, Please Don't Touch. Listen to it again, man. I've said it before, man. It gives me douche chills when I listen to that.
I mean, that's tremendous, and I would actually suggest it's one of my disappointments with the album, because it's so good.
Yeah.
You think, well, give me an album of that, Steve. Give me an album.
Yeah, well, and he did. He did.
I got to the end of it, and Chad hit the nail on the head. I think Chuck did too.
Stephen, he gave you that album. It's called Special Warnings.
Albums, when I got to the end of them, there's not enough Hackett. I mean, there's no Hackett on one, and he's the one guy on the back of the other one, and there's not enough Hackett on that one either.
Well, he's there, but also he's trying to show his abilities as a songwriter.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
a lot of the album is about songcraft. So not necessarily about, Steve Hackett, the guitar hero. He did that. He wound up doing that.
I think that's what we're saying is that's a shame, because this would have been a great time to show that.
Yeah, but I don't think
he's gone doing his own thing.
And if he would have done it with the band that he worked with the next, 2 or 3 albums, maybe Please Don't Touch would have been even better. I'm not saying this is a masterpiece, but I think it's a pretty good album. I enjoyed it. It was not a chore to go back and listen to it again. Let's put it that way. Simply because, can you tell me one song on And Then There Were Three that's as good as Please Don't Touch?
No,
there's nothing.
But you can't.
I'd agree.
You can't say that I personally can't say one album is better than another because one's got the great song on it.
No, but as I said,
there's 2 songs on Please Don't Touch that are better than anything on And Then There Were Three. But if you ask me to sit and listen to the start to the finish of both, there's one I would choose over the other, and it's And Then There Were Three.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was suffering. Really, give him his money. Give him his money back. He was suffering.
Guys, it's not often that Ken is wrong, but it's okay. It's all right.
No, I mean, it's
this is really interesting though, because like everything all you guys have said so far is a lot of the stuff that's been going through my head. And what Ken is saying, you know, his argument here is something I bring up a lot when I do these types of comparisons, because sometimes you have an album that maybe is not as strong start to finish as another one you're looking at, but there are a couple of songs that are so good that they elevate it, right, above the other one. That's happened to me a million times. And that's why this whole conversation is really striking home with me, because I get everybody's points and I agree with everybody's points.
So it's like picking an average. Like some of the points are so
Absolutely.
high, it just takes
Absolutely.
it over that even B that Ken is talking about.
Right.
His average from Please Don't Touch has enough peaks that it just raises it above that B for him.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys a question. Let's put it this way. I'm an albums guy, right? I listen to a side or I listen to a whole album. I don't pull songs, but right. Let's say you had a friend come over and you said, "Oh, you never heard Genesis? You don't know who Steve Hackett is?" Would you reach out and pull out a song off of this? On the other hand,
but
you might pull out one or two songs off of this.
Yeah, but that question's a moot point. If you're going to ask someone, do you know who Steve Hackett is? Why would you play them anything off this?
Well, I wouldn't, because obviously he's not playing on it.
So he's not there. So that's if that was the question.
No, the point is,
going to go somewhere else. Well, I'll ask you the question.
I'm getting on a plane and I'm going to come over there.
No, I'll ask you the same question then. So somebody says to you, I'll tell you what, Ken, what I really need is I need you to tell me, show me, let me hear what Steve Hackett's about. Are you going to put on Carry On Up the Vicarage? Are you going to put that on? Are you going to put on Land of a Thousand Autumns?
No, I'm going to put on The Steps.
That's your man. That's the man. That's Steve Hackett for you. Well,
I'm going to put on Shadow of the Hierophant.
To finish, so this guy's going to hear that.
I'm putting on Ace of Wands. You know?
Right. That's the right choice.
Yeah, that's the answer.
Yeah, but I know.
Ken's going with Steve Hackett on this one. Please don't touch.
Yeah, look, and
there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Not at all. So, I mean, you know, so we knew we were going to do this show for a while. So I've been listening to these two on and off for the last couple of weeks. And I haven't really had to listen to this one again because we've done other shows where this has been a part of in recent months. So, but I think a few of you have mentioned that when this album either first came out or when you first heard it, you probably didn't like it that much. And I bought this not long after it first came out. And I remember not liking this for many years. I was like, oh, yeah, that's not for me. And I ignored this, sat in my collection for a long time at LP. And, you know, then I got the CD. I will say in recent years, I've warmed up to it quite a bit. I like most of it. It is kind of ballad driven, ballad heavy, I should say. And I miss Hackett on it. But I think there's a lot of good textures and songs and melodies on there. There's a lot of good keyboards. And I think it's pretty solid start to finish. You know, I'm not a big fan of Follow You, Follow Me, but I get the appeal to a lot of people. But I think everything before that is really enjoyable. So I like that. I do. It's not a great Genesis album, but it's an enjoyable one. It's very solid. I enjoyed Dookie better than this one, to be honest with you, but they both are kind of similar for me. You know, this is not one of Hackett's best, but I will agree with Ken. There are some real high points on this album. For me, the two songs with Steve Walsh are great. I kind of wish he sang on the whole album.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
I love Steve as a guitar player. I'm never a big fan of his vocals. There are times where I cut him a little slack for his vocals, but I find his vocals a little on the weak side sometimes. I think he's developed into a better singer in more recent years, but early on, kind of a struggle. Randy Crawford is a great singer. You know, I don't know if I want to hear on a Steve Hackett album. And I got to be honest with you, I've never been a big Richie Havens fan, although he sounds pretty good on here, right? It's just his style is just not really for me.
Weren't into Back to the House, man.
So, you know, but Icarus Ascending is really cool. I think it works there. Some of the instrumental stuff is pretty cool on here. Obviously, the title track is amazing. I just find, again, like start to finish, to me, this isn't a better listen. Whereas I like some things on here better than anything on here, but some of the stuff I don't like on here, sometimes I want to skip. And so I think these are really close. Ultimately, I'm going to give it to Genesis just by a hair. just by a hair, but I will say the album that came before this and the two that came after it, probably better than a lot of these Genesis post Hackett albums are. So,
No question.
so yeah, I'm gonna give it to Genesis today, but it's very close for me. I just think it's a little, the Genesis album for me is a little more consistent. The high points are better on here, but overall, if I'm gonna choose between the two, I will probably choose this one first. So,
And we put them to a 3 to rest.
yes,
Do we have put like a moratorium on it?
no more than the words.
I mean, it's like the bad penny, you know, it just keeps coming back.
We're doing prog trios next week.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And you can get your 19 lists together.
There you go. So everybody watching, now it's your turn. So let us know what you think of both of these albums and which one you prefer. Who did it better right after the split? The albums after the split, and then there were three, Please Don't Touch, Genesis and Steve Hackett. Both really good, as you've heard here, but we all have kind of different opinions on which one is a little bit better. But there is no right or wrong answer. So let us know what you think in the comments below. And visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube, all together.
All the damn time.
For Chad Hutchinson, Chuck Alvarez, Stephen Reed, and Ken Golden, I am Pete Pardo. See you guys next week here on In the Prog Seat. Till then, have a good rest of the week. We'll see you Thursday with the Monsters Den. No album reviews tomorrow, as I'm on vacation all week and I haven't listened to a damn thing. So tomorrow will be free of new programming other than my favorite Power Trio videos and Power Trio bands. But we'll be back on Thursday night with the Monsters Den, then Friday morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff. Stephen and Simon back on Saturday for the UK connection, and then we'll see you on Monday back with the Hudson Valley Squares. So take care, everybody. Have a good rest of the week. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Hey.